Today we're finally building the single most requested feature on the entire channel, an Easthaven County airport. We'll customize it to double the amount of gates, tackle some complex infrastructure along the way, including a very direct train connection, do a bit of detailing, and even add a small US Air Force detachment. Let's get started. So probably the most defining step when building an airport is also the first one you're forced to make, and that is selecting a location. It's a pretty sizable asset in its own right, and it can generate quite a bit of traffic and activity, so you do want it linked up to major population centers. And we obviously have some geographical constraints here in Easthaven County, it being a super complex archipelago and all. So I've decided on this massive peninsula right here, because I think it's the best compromise currently. We're within a short distance of Massachusetts Route 28, which cuts through the entire county. We've got proper rail connection we should be able to set up relatively easily. We're within a short driving distance to the city of Mercy, and I think you should be able to get to downtown Fort John within 10 minutes as well. We're gonna kick off by buying these 2 tiles, and we may need more if the space isn't sufficient. And then of course we'll need to unlock the air node for the basic airport. And I'm tempted to unlock the international airport for the sole reason of hating on it. It may be super realistic and even based off a real world design, I wouldn't know. I think it's my least favorite asset in the game. So we are going to use the regional quote-unquote airport, but we're gonna do some customization that should bump up the capacity quite a bit and make it look like a small-scale international airport. So we're gonna get it placed and then immediately start customizing it. And I think we're going for something like this. A common approach to customizing this thing is by adding an additional runway, maybe just through some surfaces that isn't necessarily functional. But I was actually surprised to find just how busy some airports get with just a single runway setup. So that's not something I'm looking to change. The issue I have with this airport is that the terminal seems very, very small. So we're going to try and customize this thing so that it appears to have at least twice the actual capacity it has. So the easiest approach to get an additional terminal building would be using the static Ploppable service buildings mod. There's just one issue, and that's the fact that the terminal building is not separated from the rest of the airport in the Ploppable version. There is one way to get around this though, and that would be to just get it aligned, placing it, and then trying to lower the whole thing just a few inches into the ground so that the fake runway disappears and we're just left with the terminal. Yeah, it does look kind of weird, doesn't it? I think with a few detailing steps we can tie it all together though. So better Bulldozer should enable us to remove these weird props. We don't want trees poking through one of the terminal buildings. And then we can use a custom surface to create like one uniform surface design for all of the buildings here. And then last but certainly not least, I don't want people having to walk outside to transfer from one main terminal to the other. So we're gonna try to use some building props to kind of tie this area together. It's probably not gonna be fully streamlined design-wise, but I wouldn't mind if this terminal here looks like a more recent, newer addition. Now that is all very nice, but we are gonna need some infrastructure and at the very least a train station in place before we do any sort of detailing. We all know that my roads always turn out overly complex, dangerous and wacky, but trust me when I say this, it starts with good simple intentions. So we're gonna grab the 3-lane one-way road and flank the entire airport, and that is going to symbolize my good intention. We know my rail networks turn out even worse, so as a token of my good intentions, I'm going to prioritize trains this time around and place a simple overground train station early on so I don't have to awkwardly retrofit it afterwards. I almost feel like a reformed man, but the reality probably is that it's all gonna be downhill from here. Because instead of deciding which of these two highways are gonna feed into the airport, I've decided both of them will, and it's not gonna be very safe. Oh yeah, this is definitely one of my creations, no hiding that, but I honestly don't mind interchanges or intersections becoming kinda infamous in the local community for being bad or hard to navigate. So if this thing really turns out bad when things get hectic, feel free to email me a suggestion for how to improve it. It is purposefully bad currently, so I'm just kinda saying that. Anyways, let's get the train line connected and we are gonna move underneath this mess. We're gonna enable ground, constant slope and get as close to the mess as we possibly can. Then we'll go down by 875, which is still less than 5% drop, which I think a modern electric passenger train should be able to handle. And then we'll just get this connected up. Let's upgrade to some elevated segments and add a few key walls as well, and we'll see just how weird this actually looks. If you're screaming internally, it might be a slight consolation that this isn't actually going to be a highway. It's going to be a high-speed road, or a stroad rather. I'm going to use Road Builder to create custom versions of all these segments with a lowered maximum speed and enabled zoning. I'll just showcase one segment and do the rest off camera, but the basic premise is that instead of being a highway, I'm just going to call it a stroad. I think I used the word expressway in Santa Isabel, which could be fitting as well. But I'm going to lower the speed limit quite a bit, I think 70 km/h, which should be quite a bit fewer miles, 50, 45 it seems. And then we're going to enable zoning. We're gonna enable underground water and sewage pipes. And I don't mind having traffic lights on intersections. I've changed all the segments to now have these lower speed limits, and I kind of reversed on the stroad decision, and I'm just gonna call them express because I do imagine a stroad to actually have sidewalks. So I think if we move a bit further inwards towards Yorktown here in Mersey, a segment such as this one would probably be what I would call a stroad, or what I would designate as a stroad. So in this case, I'm going to replace both of the shoulders with a relatively narrow sidewalk. Then I would lower the speed limit to 60 kilometers an hour, or about 45 miles. Enable all the zoning jazz, of course, and then name this one the stroad. Spontaneous road builder tutorial. Let's get back to the airport. So one quick change we're gonna make is relocating the prop version of the airport a little bit, because I don't really know why I have this arbitrary distance between the two main terminal buildings. If I were to grab this, I think it would make a lot more sense to just kind of try and splice it in like this, so that we actually have a sort of natural connection between the two buildings. It makes the connection here almost seamless, and it almost even works with the vanilla parking for the functioning airport. We've got some exits and entrances here that kind of work since they're under this shade. And on the topic of parking, we're gonna need a lot more than this, because even for an airport of this size, the vanilla one, which can only accommodate 5 boardable planes at any one point in time. And this amount of parking is just way too little. We're gonna need lots more. And I think we're gonna need to handle that now pretty early on, because otherwise we're gonna have to revise some of our road networks. We're gonna use the modular vanilla parking lot roads for this purpose, but the first thing we're gonna start off with is just getting the multi-level parking building added. It's just a good way to kind of kick off this process. It adds quite a bit of parking, and I think we've just about got the space for it next to the inlet here. Then we'll need a couple of access roads for the parking lots, and I'm just gonna grab the regular vanilla alley and branch off from our one-way segment right here. And since airports are about efficiency, we probably want people to be able to access this massive new parking lot before reaching this point, because otherwise they're just gonna clutter up this main stretch, which is gonna have like a lot of stop and go traffic and buses and whatnot. So we're gonna need an easy access from all these lanes into the parking lot, and I think I have an idea of how to do this. Now remember, we're building this with expressways, so it's not super fast highway traffic, and there are traffic lights down here, so it's not that bad. Although the lane might look bad, we're gonna do something like this. Actually, that's perfect. Yoink. And then we can use the lane connector tool of the traffic mod to just ensure this lane can actually be used. Now let's build this actual parking lot. And I'm thinking of using the 2-lane perpendicular parking road for the majority of it, because it has proper sidewalks for you to carry your luggage to and from the airport. But as we move a bit further out in the, I guess, more cheap segments of parking, we might downgrade to the perpendicular parking alley for a bit of a different look. Alright, so I think we've got a decent basic parking lot layout going for us here, but something we desperately need is easy transferability to the actual airport terminal, because currently we've got 2 crossings you can make. You can walk to this entrance road and use one of the actual crossings, or you can, in theory, if you don't mind a few steps, you can actually move underneath the train station, as you guys can probably see, but you'll need to get across 5 or 6 rather steep steps. So this is not really applicable to everyone, depending on how much luggage they're carrying or if they have issues walking and all that stuff. So we'll need some crossings, and I think we need the crossings around this general area just on the other side of the train station, since this is decently covered. So I think to make a bit of space for this, we're gonna grab the regular 2-lane road and just commit to a slight upgrade. And I am actually gonna angle it like this, so we've got an open bit of space here where we can get some pathways in place. Otherwise we're gonna have a ton of trouble with networks clipping into each other and all that. My initial thought was to do a pedestrian tunnel that moves underneath the train tracks right here by the end of the station. But I also considered doing a pedestrianized bridge, especially since we could then kind of just bridge across this road and allow for direct access into the terminal, which would be pretty cool. So I think in the end, the question I have is why not both? so I'm gonna try to see if I can squeeze both modes of pedestrianized access into this build. And yeah. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure. So we're going to go for the smallest elevation steps. I think we're going to need about 7.5 meters of clearance above the train tracks. And I think the bridge is going to have the innermost lane here, if you could say that. So let's just see if we can move directly parallel to the station. And we'll go 7.5, which is 18.2% elevation, which, it's not too bad. Once again, there's going to be a factor here depending on the type of luggage you're carrying. That's for sure, but otherwise I think it's gonna work out. Now what I need is a segment. I need a couple of segments, so we're gonna add a node here because I need to move down here as well. If you don't want to cross across the street, but you need to, I don't know, access another entrance, then I would like a segment that moves kind of at an angle to directly in front of the terminal, and then I want to move into the actual terminal, something like this. It would be cheeky to add like a design flair by actually kind of upgrading this, but in terms of functionality, it's probably best to just kind of keep the roofing in place. Anyways, as I mentioned, I do want us to have the ability to actually move down here for whatever reason. And I think if we get to the 18% that we did with the incline, then that should be just fine. And then we're gonna make sure that we have an actual crossing here. And now we're gonna give the tunnel a shot. I don't think we need to move much further down than 7.5 to trigger the tunnel. Actually, it seems like we don't even need to do that, but I really don't want connection that it's trying to automatically create here. So I am just gonna move it slightly out of the way, and then hopefully move it can kind of save the day and ensure that I can kind of tweak this to our specific needs. And then I think it's going to be a little more steep here because I want to be able to connect to this piece. And once again, move it might just be able to kind of smoothen out some of this stuff, and then we'll just get a direct connection. Okay, so it did turn out a little complex, but I think that's just the nature of the challenge we had here and the amount of space, or rather the lack thereof, for actually fitting this in. And I think there are just some compromises that we kind of have to live with, given how centrally the train station has been placed right next to the airport. And I think ultimately we do want to try and incentivize people to actually use this train station to get to the airport. So if it's a bit of a hassle to get your luggage from your parked car into the airport compared to taking the train, then, you know, that's probably an okay thing. Alright, so I'm very excited about these next few steps because while we certainly lack a ton of detailing and additional work, I think we have the key ingredients to now get this connected up and functioning. That's not just for the airport, it's also the train line that's actually gonna feed it. So I think I'm just gonna get some utilities in place behind camera, as that's sort of boring, and then we're gonna start connecting this thing up so we get a bit of activity here and we can actually see how it's all gonna work. We've connected up all the utilities, which was fairly easy, as I just needed to upgrade the highway segments leading into downtown Mercy to some of these expressway segments, as they carry all the utilities underground. And now I need help from some of you train folks. Oh yes, because my initial plan is basically just to grab the train line that connects downtown Fort John to downtown Mercy and just expand on it, or rather extend it to the airport. That way you should be able to get to the airport from any current public transit node, as they all kind of join up at the public transit hub in downtown Fort John. I guess my question is whether that's the best or most realistic approach, or if you've got another idea entirely. Let me know in the comments. So let's get the simple extension added, and then we're probably gonna need at least one additional train on this line. I'm hopeful, at least. I'm hopeful we'll see quite a bit of activity from the airport. So we'll name it the Fort John Mercy Airport line, which of course begs the question what the actual airport is named. I'm gonna leave that one up to you. I'm gonna try and assign an additional vehicle because currently the line usage is very low, but it's also fairly new. So I'm hopeful with time we'll see a lot of activity. That activity is of course dependent on the airport actually working. So I'm just gonna add all 5 lines just to start with, and I'm gonna make sure I get 1 to each outside connection at a minimum. I'm just quickly adding some different colors for each line so that each of the planes looks like it has a slightly different livery. And then we're just gonna hit play and hopefully see this unfold. Okay, so I hope the amount of time each plane spends at each gate isn't like a fixed amount, so that this cycle is gonna just continue at a fixed time frame, because I don't want 3 planes landing within 10 seconds of each other. I'm gonna have to kind of redo the 5 lines then to just get some sort of immersion going, but we'll see. This is not looking very good. Maybe it's gonna happen naturally, since I guess there's a bit of a different distance to each of the outside connections. I didn't consider that. So I think we're just gonna wait it out and see if we get a little more variety. And if you feel I'm just a big nerd for actually caring about this, I am. I think we're actually starting to see some pretty decent train line usage. So this train right here, 6 cars in total, just stopped at the downtown Mersey station. Now it carried 243 passengers as it entered the station, and it's still carrying 165. I don't know how many of these get off at the airport, but we might as well just do a little check. 110-ish or something like that, so that's not half bad. And we can really see this activity in the flesh as well. So I think that's pretty positive. And we've got another one moving in now, and it also had quite a few passengers as well. So I guess something we could change is the actual trains being used here. I don't think we need 3 trains of 6 cars each on this line. That seems like complete overkill. We would probably do fine with having the same train configuration, but just 3 cars each. So I think we're just gonna switch out all 3 of them. While that change is taking place at the various rail depots, I think an additional change we can do for realism purposes is to enable a parking fee for the actual airport parking. And I think it has to be fairly expensive to actually park here, because you have some cheaper options right next to it. And this is very much what I would consider like VIP parking at an airport. So let's bump that up to 40. And we'll see if that actually has any effect, if that helps push some people over to this parking lot, which I guess in-game is technically completely free. We're just checking up on a smaller version of the train, stopping here at downtown Mersey station, and the 390 capacity seems much more fitting. And people are still boarding, so I'm interested in seeing how many people this will drop off at the airport. Lots of activity now, really nice. And it seems like we're already starting to see a few cars out here as well. So with all this good stuff now functioning and adding value to the city, I think it's time we do some proper detailing, and we're gonna do the majority of it in a time-lapsed format. But a quick note on deleting stuff. I'm actually gonna be removing this entire surface because I want the grass pitches here to kind of poke through, and then use an entirely different surface for the main runway. Additionally, we're gonna use better Bulldozer to get rid of a bunch of these annoying props. I don't want rocks or big trees within the confinements of the airport. We'll be adding some props of our own. Let's get going.
Just like we're ready. Kinda like you lately. You never ask me if I'm happy or sad. Just like we're ready. Kinda like you lately. You never ask me if I'm happy or sad. Just like we're ready. Kinda like you lately. You never ask me if I'm happy or sad. Just like we're ready. Kinda like you lately. You never ask me if I'm happy or sad.
So the detailing techniques were relatively simple, but it just adds a ton of character and really makes the airport come alive. And just as I did with my reclaimed land port the other week, I couldn't help but add some unrealistic shrubbery in here. To my defense, I did lower these bushes into the ground as much as possible, and I just think it adds that extra little flair that I couldn't help myself. So as a quick little intermission, we are now more than 158,000 strong in this community, which means we could now constitute the entire city of either Surprise in Arizona, the 166th biggest city in the US, or Denton, Texas, the 165th biggest city in the US. And as we level up, we're gonna take a look at some of the cities we can pick and choose from. So starting with Surprise, Arizona, it has some of the weirdest city limits I have ever What? That's super weird. Let's take a little dive into the actual cityscape, and oh my, that is just suburban sprawl on steroids. I can't even designate a city center here. But it is a independent city as far as I know. It has some public buildings in here, like some administrative stuff, but wow. I imagine it being impossible to live here without a car. And just look at these swoopy suburban road designs. Archetypical, I think, for like a sun-built city. So let's take a look at the other city. And Denton, Texas, has an equally odd city limit, with a few enclaves as well. That is so weird. I wonder what the history is here. But it has a more typical city layout as we move in. I think there's a very defined downtown here, and what looks like this is a university district. You can kind of see that actually, because usually the density is a bit higher. And surprisingly, there's quite a few high-rises up here by the Texas Women's University. I guess these are like dormitories. classroom, faculty, office building. So a very different city indeed. Plenty of sprawl, of course. We are in Texas. Two very different cities. I wonder which one you prefer to live in. Let me know in the comments and why. And if you actually live in one of these cities, please let us all know. I guess personally, I'd love an option without the sweltering heat, but that's gonna require a bit of a community effort because we've got a lot of sun and blue skies ahead of us. So I guess if you haven't subscribed yet, well, yeah. Okay, so for the next project, we're going to attempt to add a US Air Force detachment. Yes, I've had this idea for a little while, and I think there might be a way of making it look somewhat realistic. So I think we need a bit more land. We've already got a lot of empty space here, which I think would be really suitable. But I kind of want this area to move a bit beyond the relatively like square footprint of the airport. So I am going to just purchase at least this additional tile and do a tiny bit of terraforming just to kind of start. And I think my approach is going to be pretty simple actually. We'll use a specific road in combination with a specific storage building that's already present in the game. So let's just give this a go. I'm going to grab the narrow 2-lane, 2-way national road that I've already created with the road builder. And then I'm just going to slightly tweak it into a custom version. So we're going to say use as template. And I think I'm just going to call this Airport Road 1. Very creative. And then what I want to do is I want to convert the shoulders to have like a bit of gravel. Then I'm going to grab this road to place more instances and map out the main road, which all the sub-roads and the hangars are going to be connected to. Then we're gonna get rid of this fence net lane, as we'll obviously have to redo it, and then we have to settle on the specific hangar we want to use. So if we move into buildings and we search for storage, we should get a ton of options. We've got a couple of options, none of them really being perfect. So to kick off, I probably want to prefer a prop so that I don't have to connect utilities and won't be seeing like truck activity or other weird stuff out here. And then we've got this small version here, which I kind of like, but it's also very simple and it's probably just a tad too small. This version is a lot bigger, but the actual entrance is just, you know, undersized compared to the actual size of the hangar, which is also the case with this one. So I think this one is probably the best compromise. So let's get a few of these placed and connect them all up with the roads, and let's make sure we don't place them too close together for, I guess, strategic benefits. When adding in these small airport roads, I want to make sure there's a bit of distance to the entrance of the storage unit here so that I can utilize the cul-de-sac upgrade to hopefully create like a nice little platform. And then when connecting up to the main road here, I'm gonna have these dual connections, if you could say. I just want to make it as easy as possible for these planes to navigate because I guess their functionality is best in air. Not sure what that means, but adding the cul-de-sac here, I hope you get the general idea, especially if we just grab it and move it to the very front. So it's gonna be something like this throughout, and then we're gonna use the Better Bulldozer mod, of course, to remove these markings. Talking about strategic considerations for them to have 3 potential fighter jets being dependent on this bridge. Yeah, I mean, this is just one of these. It looks cool. We're doing it. I think at the very least we could make the bridge a little wider. Well, regardless of last-minute realism blunders, I still think this area turned out super cool, and I'm of course gonna let you military buffs out there tell me what squadron or detachment is based here at the Easthaven County International Airport, or whatever we're gonna name the airport. Anyways, I think we need to jump to something with a little more functionality and make sure that Anchor Street leads to somewhere, potentially just kind of looping out here and creating a little stretch where we can add a few businesses, maybe a place to grab a bite, something like that. We're just gonna grab a little more land so we can bring Anchor Street around, and then I'm gonna make sure we've got an additional node added to this segment, just so that we can remove the end segment here. And then let's see, we'll need our expressways, of course, because they also have zoning enabled. So we are gonna go the 2-lane one-way express, I think, and just kind of move the lane count down 1. And let's see, we'll need to enable businesses that are 4 zoning tiles deep. I think that should allow for a decent mix of commercial activity, maybe a few offices, you know, workplaces related to the actual airport here, or some of the industries out here. And then we'll just need to move in a smooth transition around the parking garage. And we need to connect up to this road here. But we also need some form of facility out here for all the military workplaces that probably come along with such a facility. So maybe we just need probably just a basic 2-lane highway moving out here. We'll see if we can get all this connected without making too much a mess of things. And I think we can fit in another slip lane if we just kind of switch this to the other 2 lanes. We'll grab the, let's see, the one-way express. And of course, disallow the left turn here, as that looks super weird. And disallow the right turn here. We're gonna use the continuous tool to get this segment connected up, hopefully at a 90-degree angle, just like that. And we can now place a few establishments here. Oh wait, let's get a key wall in place. And then I think we need another road cutting through here just to bypass this segment, if that's what you want, much like Empire Street does in context of the parking lot. So I guess somewhere like here, just move down. For the office buildings, we're simply filtering for 4 tiles deep, and going low should give us what we need, and then probably level 5 as well. And these are mainly workplaces established near the airport. It may be like small hotels, which this building certainly looks like, or you know, places that produce equipment for the airport and needs like an administrative office here as well. It could be a car rental even, but that's probably not an office building. It's probably gonna be some other look we're gonna achieve. So I just want to get a few of these placed, then a 2x4, and then on this side we're gonna go for some commercial establishments, a place to grab a bite. And this Japanese one could really be a car rental business. So let's just bring that real close to the parking garage. Maybe it has some form of integration with the garage. And another place to grab a bite. And then just to kind of utilize the empty space here, we're adding yet another road cutting through. It's not the most practical road, but yeah. And we can even squeeze in a small eatery right about here, nestled in between all this good stuff. And we'll add in yet another road just for good measure. I think we're gonna dedicate a future episode to adding a large, unique office and industrial complex right next to the airport, either involved with the commercial airline activity at the airport or maybe as part of the military industrial complex at the Air Force detachment. But to wrap up this episode, we'll do some major terraforming, adding some geographical complexity through new lakes and separating these two islands. And then we'll dive into a general detailing session just to make everything look a little more complete. I gotta say, this build has just been so much fun, and I feel like the level of detailing we're at now is kind of where I want to keep it. You can go absolutely ham with an airport like this, but that's really not what I enjoy anymore, to be honest. I can't wait to continue this build, especially the quote-unquote buffer zone between Mercy and the airport. I could imagine that some of the developments we'll be seeing here in some ways have been affected by the amount of jobs the airport brings, but also the noise pollution, of course. But that is going to be for another time. Thank you guys so much for watching, all the wonderful feedback and community participation. It really makes this so much more worth it. Thank you all. I'm gonna wrap up with some final cinematics, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye.